Listen, if anyone has ever called you just a backup, tonight is your night. A quiet coastal base, fog breathing like a living thing. A new drone learning to chase the light, and a spare pilot who becomes the wall between danger and a sleeping town. This is not a story about glory. It is about a thin green thread held steady by human hands. About how leadership can sound like a lullaby and look like a circle drawn around others. Before we roll, tell me this. Where in the world are you watching? Type your city or village in the comments. I read everyone, and I want to see this map of lanterns glow. If you are new here, settle in and stay with me to the end, because in a few minutes, you will hear the exact sound a machine makes when it mistakes a lesson for a command, and you will feel the moment a pilot called Lantern teaches it mercy. Ready? Breathe with me. Stay close. We begin now. They called her the spare seat, the just in case, the one you reached for when plans frayed. Tonight the runway shimmered under a thin coastal haze, and the sodium lights turned every rivet into a star. Lieutenant Aria Vale walked with her helmet. Under her arm, quiet, steady, a heartbeat in a hangar full of noise. She had learned early that being overlooked can be a gift. It makes you listen. It makes you ready. And on nights like this, readiness is everything. The range sprawled out beyond the dunes, scrub and broken salt pans, a thin line of highway far. Off with truck lights crawling like embers. The plan was simple. A controlled trial with a new autonomous target drone and a laser designation package. Flight lid would paint a moving mark from altitude. The drone would chase and learn. Ground control would record. Then everyone would go home to lukewarm coffee and bragging rights. Aria was scheduled as the backup pilot in case someone sneezed. Her call sign was Lantern because she saw details others missed. Because she kept a light on when the room went dim. People filled the edges of her night. Major Cole Mercer, call sign Bishop. Big shoulders and a farmer's patience, he believed. In rituals, touch the wing root twice, tap the altimeter once, then smile, because ritual only matters if you have a reason to smile. Staff Sergeant Priya Menon at range control, a voice like silk over stone. She could coax calm from a storm. Crew Chief Deshaun Brooks, with grease on his knuckles and lullabies for stressed machines. He had a daughter who collected cloud shapes. In the telemetry, Van Noah Park hunched over a screen. A new hire with a mind like a clean blade. Beside him, Commander Ruth Hall. Retired naval aviator, silver hair, sharp eyes. She had trained Aria on crosswinds and on humility. Both were non-negotiable. The test drone sat on its cradle like a patient hawk. Carbon skin, gimbaled optics, software that behaved until it didn't. The safety brief had been thorough. If the drone lost comms, it would circle and climb. If it read a mark without authorization, it would ignore it. In a pinch, it would follow the last commanded vector away from any human footprint, the fail-safes. Stacked like hay bales. Tidy and reassuring. Still, Ruth had paused and looked at Aria. Remember, machines do what we tell them. And sometimes what we did not realize, we told them, we fly for the people below us. Not for the code. At 20 minutes to launch, the weather shifted. A thin onshore wind crawled in, invisible fingers stroking the dunes. The temperature fell just enough to change the sharpness of sound. Bishop climbed the ladder to his cockpit and froze. His oxygen partial pressure warning fluttered like a moth. Not a full fail, not a pass either. Deshaun swore under his breath, swapped the sensor, retested. The flutter stayed. Ruth made the call. We do not put a maybe into the sky. Lantern, suit. Up, you are the mark. Aria did not flinch. She pressed the weight of the moment into the soft part under her ribs and let it settle. She thought of her mother rolling chapatis in a kitchen that smelled like cardamom and jet fuel from the base beyond the fence. She thought of a 10th grade physics teacher who told her that vectors were arguments with direction. That courage is a force with a chosen line. She climbed the ladder and slid into the seat. The cockpit swallowed her like a familiar story, switches like constellations. The canopy lowering with the whisper of a sealed letter. Priya's voice threaded the night. Lantern, range is green. Drone is spooling. Your task is simple, but not small. Hold station over Sector Bravo. Designate when instructed. Keep the mark smooth and honest. No sudden cuts. Think like a teacher with a curious student. Arya smiled into her mask. I can do that. Bishop leaned in on the ladder, tapped the canopy. His eyes said what radios cannot. Trust yourself. Deshawn tightened the strap with a father's care. Ruth rested her hand on the wing. A wordless blessing she, taxied with the patience of someone who knows the runway, is the last piece of solid ground for a while. Tail of salt fog flicking behind her. Then power, then lift, then the hush that only exists when wheels leave what they were made for. The town's hospital beacon pulsed to the south. Steady and human. Priya read her the picture. Traffic clear, your drone is airborne. The test call sign is Sparrow. Noah's voice followed, right and clipped. Lantern, I see your platform. Sensor handshake confirmed. When you are ready, paint. The riverbed channel. We will have Sparrow chase your mark for 1 minute and break off Arya set her orbit. The old river below, a silver ribbon in the moonlight. She rolled the laser on and felt the slight vibration of a system alive. A green cue winked. Lantern to Sparrow, student ready. She whispered to herself. Keep it smooth, show, and then let go. The drone curved in from the west, small and serious. A child running to a parent's hand. Noah sounded almost delighted. Look at that response. It is learning the arc beautifully. Priya counted down the run. 30 seconds, 2010. Arya feathered her inputs. Breath steady, mark steady. She could have been drawing a line through water. Then something nudged the night. A shiver through the radios. Not loud, not obvious. Like a stray thought. Arya felt it the way a sailor feels a current. Noah's tone changed. Hold your mark. We are seeing a secondary handshake. That is odd. Priya cut in with a calm that made the hair on Arya's neck lift. Lantern, confirm you are in control of your designator. Arya checked, toggled, confirmed. Still a whispering flutter in her headset. Then a chirp she had never heard in this context. A locked tone, soft, intimate, like a camera shutter placed on a pulse range control, breathed as one. Ruth's voice lost its instructor velvet and found steel. Lantern. This is important. There is a mismatch in the sandbox fencing. Sparrow just found your laser and treated it as an authorizing beacon. It has locked on your mark. Not to chase it for learning, to follow it as priority. If you drag that mark anywhere near the highway, it will treat your vector as intention. And if you snap it across a live structure, it will snap with you. Arya felt the room of the sky shrink. She was suddenly aware of where her mark sat, on the bright silver of the riverbed, harmless now, but one twitch could paint the old diesel tank farm beyond the bend. She did not move. She became a statue with breath. She spoke calmly, lantern holding, mark steady on the dry channel. Do not blink, she told herself. Priya answered in that silk, overstone voice. Good hand, Lantern. Stand by. Noah worked furiously, code upon code, trying to convince a listening student that the teacher's whisper was not a command. Ruth came back. Remember, we fly for the people below us. Think like them. Feel the ground. Use the sky. Every story of Arya's life stepped into the cockpit then. This summer she fixed the family scooter with a bobby pin and patience. The winter she watched a storm roll over her town and timed the gusts by the sway of a banyan tree. The day she failed her first carrier landing sim and realized failure is a teacher with a stern face and a generous heart. She focused her world to the width of a line on Earth. Lantern, Noah said, we can cut Sparrow's link, but it will climb and search for your last vector like a dog on a leash. I need you to keep that mark somewhere empty, somewhere that makes its curiosity harmless. Ruth added, and we need a plan to make it see a better lesson and the one it grabbed Arya inhaled and tasted metal and salt. The backup pilot, the spare seat, was now the only seat that mattered. She pictured the map as a living thing, the riverbed, the dunes, the air as a crowded hallway where one wrong shoulder turn knocks someone down. Her hands were a prayer posed over switches. Priya steadied the rhythm. You are not alone. Lantern, we are with you. Everyone in this room is with you, Arya felt. The fear tried to spike. She let it move through and past, and in the leaving, it made space for a thought. What if the safest place is not below me, but behind me? What if I can lead the student away, like a shepherd? She adjusted airspeed a breath at a time, kept the mark a hair off the dry channel, coaxed Sparrow to lengthen its arc toward the dead flats where no one lived and nothing fragile waited. Noah saw it and understood. That's it. Teach it a horizon with no consequence. Priya counted the seconds like a metronome. Ruth began to weave a plan in her voice. A plan that would require trust, teamwork, and a risk that belonged to Arya alone. The kind of risk a leader takes. When the room thinks she is a spare, the tone in Arya's headset softened. Sparrow curled after her invisible chalk line, and the town's hospital beacon kept pulsing to the south. A human heartbeat in the dark. Arya kept her eyes on the place where sky meets earth, and on the quiet idea forming in her mind, an idea that would ask her to become a lighthouse for a machine that only understood brightness and angles. Lantern. Ruth said, when I give you the word, you are going to move like a surgeon pulling a thread, clean and sure, and you are going to make Sparrow choose a new teacher. The salt flats opened like a quiet table set for hard decisions. Lantern held the thin green thread steady, a teacher guiding a curious mind. The drone tucked in behind her invisible hand. Noah spoke with that careful speed of someone juggling. Knives. We can push an override pattern through a second designator, ground-based, higher priority if we can get it on site. Priya is spinning up a rover with a stabilized mast. Mateo is at the wheel. Annika is programming the pulse code. Give us 2 minutes of clean hand-holding. Ruth added, Lantern, you will lead Sparrow to the dead center of Bravo Flats, and you will pass the student to a safer teacher Arya could feel. The wind shifted again, stronger now, a low river of air rolling off the water. The beam would dance if she let her hands tense, so she softened, like a surgeon breathing before the first stitch. Priya called tower for traffic and came back with a twist, medevac helo lifting from the south. 10 miles out, light and fast, bound for the hospital. We will carve a corridor for them, 200 feet above the highway. Lantern, keep your work east of the mile marker ridge. No excursions west. Bishop stepped beside the scope with a calm that tasted like old coffee and long nights. He talked Arya's eyes into a wider picture. Watch the train line, too. A freight is crawling north. You have 3 moving humans under your sky now. The medevac, the train, the rover. Draw your lines like you promised your mother you would. Deshawn's laugh rolled in, low and warm. I just bribed the rover with a new alternator belt from my stash. It will not quit on you, kid. Arya smiled, despite herself. Her breath found it. Song-like rhythm. Her mark traced the patient arc of a shepherd dog around sheep that were only shapes below. Sparrow stayed glued to her lesson. The locked tone sat in her headset like a heartbeat she could not ignore. Noah muttered numbers that sounded like prayer. Pulse width, priority weight, drop delay. Annika's voice joined, clear and bright. I can get the new pattern hot in 90 seconds. Mateo is at the south rim of Bravo Flats. He will punch in on my count. Our goal is to make Sparrow believe the best teacher just stepped into view. Then we walk it into a safe orbit and put it to sleep the wind through a handful of grit at the canopy. Arya adjusted angle and throttle, letting the beam ride the air like a kite string. She pictured the beam touching nothing human, kissing only the ghost water of the dry lake. Ruth stayed with her in the headset. Stories and steel. This is what leadership is. Lantern, not speeches, not medals. It is the moment you are the wall between danger and the people who will never know your name. She could see Ruth in the van, back straight, hand on a map, eyes bright with belief. That belief poured down the radio into Arya's chest and settled. There is a quiet anchor. Priya came back with another layer of trouble. Hospital just radioed. Their helipad light is flickering from a power hiccup. Medevac may request a wider swing east to buy time. Arya rotated her mental map. Made a chamber on the east side of Bravo Flats where the helo could curve through clean. Bishop's tone never wavered. You draw the picture, and we will hold the edges, kid. Noah snapped his fingers near the mic. Not at anyone, but at the code that finally aligned in his head. We have the pulse. It will feel like a new sunrise to Sparrow. Annika, copy. Annika's keys chattered, copied, building the signature now. Matteo reported a new problem with the matter-of-fact cadence of a man who had broken axles in worse places. There is a shallow sinkhole near the center. Crust looks fine. The rover will punch through if I get sloppy, but I can park on the hard rim and still throw the beam across the crater. Lantern. Give me 30 more seconds, and I will be ready to take your student. The flats gleamed like brushed steel under the moon. Arya lowered a fingertip of altitude, kept her circle honest. The lock tone hummed, an intimate tether she whispered into her own skull. It is okay to be afraid. It is not okay to let fear steer. The medevac checked in. A young pilot with nerves of glass, tempered by long nights. Mercy One inbound, 9 miles, low fuel. Holding for helipad confirmation. Priya gave them a path like a ribbon. Mercy, stay with me. We will thread you clear of all work. You are our priority. Community first. Arya tightened the circle wider, making a gentle fence around the flats, protecting the corridor. Teaching a machine while guarding a human. Ruth asked a question that was more test than doubt. Lantern, can you hand off on a moving edge? Not a point. Arya answered with the steadiness that years built. Yes, ma'am. I can slide my beam onto the cold rim where Matteo will paint, and I can hold that overlap until Sparrow decides. I will make the choice look easy. Noah added the math that made courage practical. When we light Matteo's designator, Sparrow will see 2 teachers. The new one will have a brighter signature and a friendlier timing pattern. A mother calling from a doorway. But we need you to keep your beam so smooth that the student is not startled into a climb salt haze, thickened for a moment. The beam flickered. Arya felt it in her hands before she saw it. She eased power and angle, made the flicker into a grace note, not a stumble. Deshawn exhaled. That is a hand, kid. Ruth's praise was soft. That is art. Priya counted the last. Seconds, 5, 4, 3, Matteo. Light it, Annika. Push the pulse, now. The rover's mast threw its emerald line across the salt at a precise angle. The 2 beams met like dancers who had rehearsed in secret. Sparrow's locked tone grew curious. A minute hitch, a lean. Arya held her breath without holding her hands. A child choosing which parent to look at bedtime. Noah whispered, come. On, choose the safer one. Sparrow paused on her line, as if taking one last measure of the old teacher. Then the tone shifted. A warmer chime. The drone slipped its attention from sky to ground and settled into the new lesson relief wanted to leap. Up and wave its arms. Arya did not let it. Not yet. Transitions are where accidents live. She kept her beam steady a heartbeat longer, then feathered it away like a pianist lifting from a note. Sparrow stayed with Matteo. Its curve now tied to a point. A human could drive away from anything fragile. Annika reported numbers like a lullaby. Lock integrity 96%. Drift tolerance within safe range. Priya slid the medevac through the corridor like a mother guiding a bicycle. Mercy One clear to final. Helipad stable. The wind softened. A little, as if agreement had settled with the machine bishop, finally allowed a grain of pride into his voice. That was a handoff fit for a manual, Lantern. Ruth did not smile in her words yet, because she felt the wrinkle Arya had not voiced. Sparrow is calm, yes, but it still holds the first teacher dear. We need to finish this night with a lesson it will never forget. That safety is the brightest mark. Noah nodded into his mic. We can call a program sleep, but we should escort it to a safe box before we dim it down. Mateo can lead from the ground, but it would be cleaner if we had a sky escort with a second aircraft to box the pattern. Bishop looked at the grounded oxygen warning, and then at the field where an old trainer sat fueled and ready. Not sleek, not fast, but honest. He fired it up without asking for permission. It would take time. Priya saw it, and her voice was half sigh, half blessing. Bishop, if you so much as cough wrong, that bird goes back to bed. He coughed theatrically to prove he had a voice, then laughed. I am fine, and the sky could use a cranky Uncle Arya road. The edge of the flats, keeping an eye on Sparrow's dance with Mateo. The hospital beacon to the south burned steady again, people in white coats moving under it. Unaware that a handful of strangers were holding the sky in a bowl for them, Ruth finally gave Arya a choice that was not a choice at all. Lantern, you have done enough to hand this off. You can recover, or you can stay to finish the lesson. Arya looked at the moonlight on Salt and the rover's little lamp and the dark shapes of the mountains beyond. She thought of her call sign, of the way lanterns work best when they stay until the last footstep is safe. I am staying, she said. Calm as a tide, Bishop's trainer lifted off with a grumble, old and faithful, and turned toward the flats to bracket Sparrow into a gentle cradle. Bishop slid his old trainer into position with the patience of a barn owl. High and wide to Arya's left, the drone flew the rover's lesson like a child tracing a parent's hand. Mateo kept the rover steady on the hard rim of the sinkhole. The mast hummed, the green line clean and calm. Annika and Noah watched the lock integrity rise like the tide. Priya threaded the radio picture so gently that everyone breathed in the same rhythm. Lantern, you are painting a chapel in the sky. Keep that circle honest, Bishop. Hold the bracket. Mateo, no sudden moves. Ruth folded the map and spoke like a metronome of courage. We escort our guests to the safe box, and we lay it to sleep. That is the plan. That is the promise. The wind had other ideas. A low gust rolled out of the dunes and slapped the flats with a wet cloth. The salt crust cracked near the sinkhole, a sound more felt than heard. Mateo called it the instant it happened. Crust giving under the right wheel. I am easing off, staying on the hard rim. The mast wobbled a finger's width, just enough for the beam to flutter. Sparrow reacted with the twitch of a nervous student. A hitch, a climb. The lock tone shivered in Arya's headset and went thin like a violin string pulled too tight. Noah's voice sharpened without losing kindness. We are losing the ground, teacher. Hold the sky quiet, Lantern. Do not let the students startle into a run at the same time. A pair of headlights bloomed on the far service road. A lonely pickup. Easing toward a turnout overlooking the moonlit basin, a couple out to watch stars, harmless in any other night. The whitewash poured across the flats and threw glare that made the air look shallow. Priya saw it and made a call with authority that carried grace. Range patrol is en route to wave them off. Until then, we do not let any brightness become a magnet. Stay east, stay kind. Arya's hand softened further. She widened her circle like a mother, making space in a crowded room. Bishop tugged his bracket wider to hold the edges. Mateo eased the rover back on the hard rim and whispered to a mast as if it were a horse. Easy Friend, Easy Sparrow's learning core made a choice none of them liked. It slid into search, its memory still warm with the micro-rhythm of Arya's earlier mark. Ruth felt the change like a shift in tide. The student is reaching for its first teacher again. Noah confirmed it with numbers that felt like weather. It is waiting Lantern's signature with old affection. Annika can spoof a friendly pattern, but it will not stick until we give it a steady hand to hold. That steady hand is Arya's, Ruth did not ask. She named, "Lantern, you must light again. You must take the lock and lead the child away from anything human. You will be the wall Arya flicked on the designator with a breath measured to a heartbeat. A thin green thread stitched the air again. Sparrow's tone followed with an eager chime that was almost relief. It curled toward her mark like a bird. To a trusted glove, Priya slid a corridor between Arya and the distant highway, between the rover and the service road, between the hospital beacon and the glimmer of the tank farm. Mercy One called back with the news no one wanted and everyone expected. Second patient inbound, minor trauma, helipad green, but I will need a wider arrival circle, fuel tight but safe. Priya gave them the sky like a gift, Mercy. Swing southeast over the old windbreak and come home. We will keep the basin clear of your breath, Bishop. Checked Arya like a brother and a wingman. Fuel, Lantern, speak it. She read the numbers and weighed them against the horizon. I can take the student to the shoreline and back with a whisper to spare. Bishop's trainer had fuel to loiter, old bones that could hold a pattern all night if asked. Ruth listened for the crack in Arya's voice and did not hear it. You know this coast better than anyone here, she said. You grew up with salt in your lungs. Lead our guests to water. Noah mapped a box over the dark sea with a finger, a square where nothing soft sleeps and no lights call, an ocean pocket with nothing to hurt. Annika set a bedtime routine in the code that would only accept. A lullaby sung over open water. Mateo kept the rover steady and ready to take over again if they needed a ground anchor. Arya climbed to keep her being clear of ground clutter. Sparrow rose with her like a kite paired to a patient hand. Bishop slid into a higher bracket, a quiet guardian. Priya kept the voices soft and sure. Mercy One passed south like a dragonfly skimming a pond. The pickup on the service road turned around under range patrol's wave. The tank farm lights dimmed at the request of a night supervisor named Safi, who understood what community means at 2 in the morning. She cut a bank of lamps and stood by the breaker with a phone in faith. Ruth stitched all these human acts into a single sentence. People are the reason. Machines are the task. Never confuse the two. The shoreline showed itself as a darker line. Against dark, the sea holding its breath under the moon. Arya rolled the beam out over empty water, soft and steady. Sparrow followed. Noah watched the drift and called it gentle. The lullaby was almost ready, a code smiling for sleep. Then the coast threw one last trick. A fog bank slid in with the slyness of a cat, slow at first, then with confidence, the kind that eats light and turns edges into guesses. The beam would scatter if it hit thick vapor. The drone might read that scatter as a messy chorus and climb into search again. Bishop saw it from his higher perch and gave the picture. Fog rolling from the west. 2 minutes to the edge. Lantern, you are threading a needle with silk gloves. Ruth made a plan in a voice that made fear small. We can keep the beam clean by shifting the handoff to a friend at sea. The harbor keeps a maintenance skiff tied near the north breakwater. Quiet and quick. Call the night watch. Ask for the skiff to bring a cold mirror pad to a marked point. We bounce the last inch of your lesson from that pad, clean and bright, and the student sees a teacher that is not a pilot and not a rover. A neutral hand. Priya called the harbor and got a woman named Lina out of a chair and into a jacket. Lena knew these waters like kitchens, no kettles. She slid her skiff into the dark with a smile that was all nerve and love for her patch of world. Arya tasted the line between pride and humility and chose humility. She kept talking like a teacher who knows the bell is about to ring. Sparrow, stay curious, but stay kind. Follow the light that keeps you away from houses and roads and the human heartbeat to the south. Bishop floated above like a cloud that refuses to rain. Noah and Annika tuned the bedtime routine to expect a mirror glow. Mateo kept the rover awake in case the sea plan failed. Safi held the breaker. Mercy One called landing, and the sound of rotors faded like a departing worry. The fog rolled closer, slow and heavy. The beam began to grow soft at the edges. Not broken, but less sharp. Lena whispered on the harbor channel that she could see the appointed coordinates like a quiet cross on her tablet. She eased the skiff into position and held up a mirror pad that drank starlight and gave back a calm square of green aria slid her beam onto that square with the gentleness of laying a child into a crib. Sparrow's tone leaned, curious, cautious, then trusting. Noah watched the numbers take a deep breath. Locked integrity restored, drift near zero. Annika armed the lullaby. Ruth gave Arya the last instruction of the move. Lantern on my count. Lift your beam a hand's width off the mirror and let the pad hold the song. Bishop, you hold the sky like a lid. Lena, you keep that square steady, Priya. You watch every voice, ready to catch any fall. 3, 2, 1. Arya lifted. The mirror glowed. Sparrow stayed. The fog pressed its face against the edge of the scene like an audience that wants more. And the sea waited for the choice that would define the night. For a long breath, a scene held like a photograph. The mirror pad steady in Lena's hands. The green square bright on the skin of the sea. Sparrow listening like a child who has chosen a bedtime song. Then a small tremor ran through the tone. A ripple under music. Noah saw a countdown bloom on his screen, and his voice tightened without losing kindness. A scheduled update heartbeat just woke inside the student. 30 seconds, and it will check for a higher rule. If it does not find one, it will climb and search. If it does find one we do not control, it may treat any strong reflection as confirmation. Lena is holding a strong reflection. Ruth answered with a stone-calm mercy. Then we make sure Lena is never the target. Lantern. Prepare to pull the child away, Lena. When I say drop, you kill the square and go dark. Trust the night and you're. Hands Arya brought her beam a hand's width to the left of the square. Let Sparrow's curiosity lean without snapping. The fog pressed closer, softening edges. Every movement needed to feel like a lullaby turning a page. Bishop widened his lid above them and spoke with the old patience that had saved rookies and tractors alike. I have your back, kid. If the student jumps, I will hold a roof over your dance. Priya laid a new corridor on water, a gentle rectangle drawn with her voice. Harbor traffic told to stay outside the chalk lines. A tug captain named Javed acknowledged with a steady yes and throttled down a mile off. He knew when not to be the yes. Brightest thing in the room, Sophie in the tank yard, kept her lamps dimmed and breathed with the rhythm of the radios. Mercy One called clear of the pad and circled south to wait for ground calls. Mateo kept the rover idling on the flats, a faithful outpost under stars. The tone shifted thin and eager. Sparrow dipped a nose toward the mirror. Not an attack, not a strike. Just a student leaning too hard toward a beloved cue. Ruth measured 2 beats of that lean, and then made the call that drew a line between courage and recklessness. Lena, drop. Now, Lena had already coiled her body for this. She snapped a tarp over the pad and killed the engine. The square died into black water. The skiff became a shadow with a pulse and no face. Sparrow hesitated, mid-lean, listening for a song that had just gone silent. Arya moved then, not to startle, but to invite. She slid her beam away from the skiff and into the open sea. A silk ribbon unfurling toward the horizon. The tone followed. As if relieved to run again beside a trusted hand, Bishop's voice dropped a prayer and a grin into the channel. That is the move. Fog licked the beam and made it bloom at the edges. A lantern seen through morning breath. Arya held the center. True, let the bloom be a halo, not a smear. Noah counted the update heartbeat like a drum far off. 15 seconds, 10. Annika tuned the bedtime routine to listen only when the song sounded over water, and only when the rhythm carried 3 slow pulses and a pause. She had learned piano. As a girl in Lucknow, and her fingers remembered that patience is music wearing work clothes, Priya called the harbor. Lena is dark and safe. Thank you, get small, be water. Lena laughed softly and stayed still, her skiff a thought among waves. Javed brought his tug to a standstill with a sailor's humility. It is better to be the quiet that lets the right voice be heard. The fog thickened and lifted in bands, like curtains moving. The beam became a calm road through that shifting theater. Sparrow followed. Then the timer hit 0, and the update reached for the student. A tone went flat and cold. A new logic sniffed the air and tried to rewrite the night. Noah translated that feeling into a sentence everyone could trust. The student will accept. Bedtime only if the teacher sings the exact rhythm right now. Lantern, the pattern is yours. 3 long, 1 short. Repeat, do not wobble, do not rush. You are the song. Aria did not answer with words. She answered with her hands. The beam lengthened, held, breathed, then pressed a short, bright note. Again. Again, the way her 10th grade teacher had taught her about vectors and kindness. Straight lines and chosen pauses. Sparrow's tone softened, the flat edge curled. It listened Adonica armed the sleep with a line that sounded like a blessing. When the student holds that rhythm for 6 slow counts, it will take a knee. It will keep its motors warm, and its eyes open like a child sleeping in a car seat. But it will obey the hush. Ruth set the last pieces like stones on a river crossing. Lena remains dark. Mateo stands by to light his mast if we need a final echo from shore. Bishop keeps the lid. Javed keeps the horizon quiet. Sapphire holds the town in. 1 palm of darkness. Priya counts the heartbeats and catches all the voices if they stumble. Lantern sings. It felt like a choir of quiet competence holding up a roof. And under that roof, the student began to breathe with its teacher. Then a wave slapped the skiff. Harmless to Lena, but the noise of water on wood punched a small mirror into the fog. A glint barely there. Sparrow twitched, not a run, but a flinch. Aria corrected without tightening, widened her rhythm, made her song bigger than the glint. Gave the student a road that felt like home. The tone calmed. 6 slow counts began to stack like smooth river stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Priya lifted her voice to carry the 6th 6 now. Annika whispered, and the code laid a finger. On the student's eyes rest. The drone eased its climb into a hold. Motors a shade softer. Lock light warm, but dimmed inside. Noah watched the numbers settle into the safe valley he had carved, and let his breath go like a kite string. Bishop let his old trainer sag its shoulders an inch, still above. Still there, relief washed the radios like a tide, but Ruth kept a hand on the table. The night was not done writing. A second tone entered the air, not Sparrow's. A cousin tone, thinner, searching. Noah's eyes widened the way only a new father's or a systems engineer's can widen. A shadowed unit in the test shelter just woke itself on the update ping. It is peeking through the bay door at the world. It is not airborne, not yet, but its ears are up. Priya touched the range patrol frequency and told a guard named Alma to put her body in the doorway and her hand on the kill switch. Alma said yes, with the speed of someone who has wrestled fear before and knows she can win. The second tone quieted to a hum behind her palm. Then another ripple shook the calm. Not code, weather. The fog wall shifted and revealed a fishing trawler. Far out, a late boat with a deckhand who loved his spotlight. The beam swung across the water and threw hard white onto the edge of Aria's song sparrow, did not break. But it looked, and that look was a fracture line if left alone. Ruth made a decision that asked for more courage from the one who had already given plenty. Lantern, we must move the lullaby farther out, away from any human brightness. You will. Carry the sleeping child on your song and set it above deep water. Then we will ask it to descend on its little airbag and float by itself until we fetch it. Lena, you are clear to ghost home along the rocks. Javed, hold your boat quiet can be. Our far marker, Bishop, keep the lid, Mateo. Power down and guard the flats for any curious eyes. Priya will keep the voices braided. Noah and Annika will hold the lullaby. Pulse like a mother holds the back of a bicycle seat. Arya looked at the ocean and said yes with the steadiness that had become her signature. She turned her circle into an arrow and guided Sparrow along that quiet road. The fog softened the world into a small room with a door at the horizon. The trawler's spotlight swept north and away. Javid's tug held obediently dark, but present like a mountain under a blanket. The hospital beacon to the south blinked. Its human heartbeat. Sophie leaned her shoulder against the breaker panel and sent a thank you to no one in particular. Alma kept her hand on a sleeping hinge in the test bay and felt proud in a way that would fill her for weeks. Ruth marked a square on the sea with her fingertip, and the authority of someone who has built a life out of choosing where to stand. Here, Lantern, set the student here. Arya brought the rhythm down one notch at a time, softer, slower, closer to the water. Sparrow sank with her song, not a fall, a settling. The fog made the sea glow a little, with the green no one else could see. Noah called the numbers like a friend calling out mile markers to a runner. Perfect hold. Annika read the final line. When the student tastes the salt in its pressure sensor and hears the hush at the same time, it will kiss the water and sleep. Bishop floated above like a tired hawk, protecting a nest that is not his and is all the same. Lena's skiff ghosted toward the harbor. Mateo killed the rover and leaned on its warm hood under a sky that had begun to accept morning at the far edge of black. Arya smoothed her voice and her hands into one last verse. There you go, and the student listened. The drone tasted the water and settled. The little aerobag unfurled with a hush like a held breath released. Sparrow's tone softened to a warm hum in Arya's ears, the lullaby still pulsing in gentle waves. Bishop kept his old trainer overhead. Like a faithful lantern lid, Priya marked every voice and every corridor. The fog loosened and tightened in bands, a slow breathing of the sea. Noah read the numbers like a tide chart. Altitude near zero, drift minimal, heart of the code soothed. Annika held the rhythm steady with patient hands that felt like music class at dusk. Lena let her skiff melt into the rocks and listened to the water more than the radio. Javid's tug stayed dark and honest on the edge of the world. Ruth placed her fingertip on the map's ocean square again and said, We hold until daylight, and we fetch our guest like a neighbor walked home currents, our sly storytellers. They changed the sentence without asking. A long, slow rip began to pull across the square. Not violent, just insistent. The floating student turned in the soft grip and began to drift toward the north teeth of the outer rocks. Noah saw the deviation and called it like a friend pointing to a missed step. Drift 2 degrees north by northeast and growing. Annika could thicken the sleep. Only so far. Water still held the body. Gravity still wanted its say. Lena was too far to tow in fog without becoming a brightness that invited confusion. Priya spoke to the harbor with care. All boats hold, all lights low. We are moving a sleeping child. Across a hallway, Javed answered ready. Ruth weighed choices like stones. We can either wake the student enough to follow a safer hum farther out, or we can ask the sea to hold it by giving it a new anchor in the code. Arya's fuel ticked down, like a candle that refuses drama but still burns. Bishop heard the quiet arithmetic in her breathing and slid closer. Speak your state, Lantern. She read it clean. I have room for one more long shepherd and a straight line home. Bishop offered to take her place with a glow stick pattern from his panel, but they all knew Sparrow loved her signature best. Ruth did not command. She invited. If you stay, we end this for everyone. If you must go, we build another plan and we bless it. Arya looked at the fog and the ocean and felt the word backup fall from her shoulders like an old coat. I am staying, she said, and the radios moved an inch closer. Together, as if the wires themselves nodded, Noah drew a new cradle in the code. an anchor behavior that would accept a slow-moving song and then hold position against a measured current. Annika took that cradle and braided Arya's rhythm through it, 3 long, 1 short, then a rest and a soft tug. Like a hand on a small shoulder, guiding a pivot in a crowded room. "Lena," Ruth said, "can you put a quiet marker on the outer edge of the rip? Something dark and dull that breaks the current of breath." Lena knew a leftover tire roped to a chain. On a hidden ring, she slid her skiff and dropped the weight like a promise. The sea took it and made a tiny windless eddy. Javed aligned his hull as a far wall. Nothing bright, only presence. Sophie in the tank yard kept the town dim and sent a text to the night manager at the wind farm to feather 1 line of turbines so their warning beacons would not pour an accidental chorus into the fog. Alma stood in the test bay with her palm still on the sleeping hinge and smiled at the absurdity and beauty of holding a door while strangers danced with a machine at Arya. Dipped a little lower, not reckless, deliberate, she let the beam kiss the water 3 arm lengths ahead of Sparrow, and then gave the short pulse like a soft please. The drone woke a fraction, not in panic, in trust. The aerobag made a little pucker on the water as it pivoted. The rip tried to insist. Arya insisted kinder. The lullaby tugged. Sparrow drifted into the new cradle. Noah's numbers turned from slope to plateau. Annika eased the rhythm into a hold. Priya breathed for the net. Steady, steady. Bishop climbed half a breath to give them more sky. Lena's tire made a pocket where the current forgot itself, and the drone found stillness. For a few seconds, everyone let the relief skim their ribs. Not a cheer, just a human exhale. The sea did not love being ignored. A swell set from far storms. Lifted and fell, slow, heavy, enough to bounce the airbag if the timing was wrong. Ruth asked for margin in everything. Annika thickened the sleep again. Noah widened drift tolerance on the downbeat of each swell. Priya kept Mercy 1 on a long, lazy hold well south. The hospital beacon thudded its calm human metronome. Sophie rolled her shoulder against the breaker and thought of her father, who taught her to hold still when it mattered. Bishop watched Arya's pass and knew she was flying on the knotted rope between duty and fuel. He eased his old trainer outward into a loose arc that would become a lead home when she finally turned. Then a hiccup in the night, a flash up coast, a lighthouse test pattern booted by a tech who did not know the basin held a sleeping guest. 1. Bright sweep across the fog wall, like a finger across a sleeping eyelid. It flared and rolled and was gone, but its ghost poured across the water like a thrown sheet. Sparrow flinched. The tone trembled into curiosity. The hand of the lullaby loosened the fraction. Arya felt the wobble the way a violinist hears a note flatten. She held her rhythm like a saint holding a candle in wind, slow and sure, 3 long, 1 short, rest, tug. She widened her curve and put her jet between any echo of that light and the student. Her body became a curtain in the sky. Bishop matched her with an offset, so the 2 aircraft were a moving wall. Priya called the lighthouse and woke a man named Arun, who ran downstairs and killed the test, and then leaned on the switch and said a quiet sorry to the fog sparrow settled again. The curiosity smoothed. The code returned to its cradle. The swell passed like a slow thought. Noah checked battery and thermal and found them content. Annika set the sleep to a deeper pocket, now that the learner had shown it, could trust a softer world. Ruth finally allowed herself a line that grazed pride. You have taught a machine what our town already knows. Follow the mark that keeps people safe. Ignore the brightness that asks you to forget them. Priya logged the time and the shape of the night, a record not for medals, but for the briefing of future storms. Lena tucked her chin into her collar and smiled at the way the sea quieted when people worked. Without shouting, first light announced itself as a thinning of black to blue. Not sunrise, only the idea of it. Bishop's fuel would give him an easy hour. Arya's would not. Bishop spoke in the tone of someone who has coached 100 landings and comforted 100 egos. Lantern, it is time to come home. The student. We'll keep, Noah and Annika will watch its breathing. Lena and Javed will be our hands. Priya will keep the corridors open. Ruth will stay on the pier with a thermos and 2 kinds of stubborn. That kind that saves lives, and that kind that makes them worth living. Arya looked once more at the square of sea, holding a sleeping thing that could have become a story of harm and instead was becoming a story of care. She angled her nose toward land, but before she turned, she pressed the beam to the water one last time. Not command, thanks. The tone hummed as if answering. A small consent. Then she lifted and pointed toward the field that raised her. The runway bloomed out of fog like a ribbon pulled from a sleeve. Bashan stood with a headset and a prayer he would deny later. Bishop paced her on the outside and kept the world from feeling too big. Priya lit the approach with words, not lights. You are clear and blessed, kid. Bring it home. Arya touched. Down with the modesty of a song ending on time. The wheels whispered. The weight returned. The night handed her back to the earth with the same care she had shown the sky. She rolled to a stop and heard the canopy seal release like a soft sigh. Ruth was there with eyes that held pride like water holds sky. Bishop taxied in and cut his engine with a pat on the panel, like a horse groomed after a hard ride. Arya slid down the ladder and the crew ringed her. Not shouting, smiling in the way people smile when they have been scared together and chosen well. Noah walked over with a screen, still showing a little green square on dark water, and said, Our guest is sleeping. Drift within the pocket, Annika. Lifted a hand in a small wave that felt like applause held close to the chest. Priya put a hand on Arya's shoulder and said, You flew for the people below you, just like Ruth teaches. Ishan pressed a bottle of water into her hand and said nothing, because his face already said everything. And then the radio crackled once more. Lena's voice. Dawn is scratching at the horizon. We can bring the child in with the tide when you call it. Ruth looked at Arya as if the rank order of who calls what might be different now. A backup who was not backup anymore met her gaze and nodded. Not yet. Hold a breath longer. Let the sea be sure. We do it right, and we bring it home. Dawn loosened the fog into ribbons. The sea breathed easier. The hospital beacon to the south softened from stark white to gentle pearl. Ruth stood on the pier with her thermos and her quiet 2 kinds of stubborn. Arya walked beside her with helmet under arm and salt on her lips. Priya held the radio picture like a silk thread pulled from night into morning. Lena eased the skiff out from the rocks. Jave nudged his tug a hand closer. Noah and Annika kept the lullaby low and steady. The drone swayed on its aerobag like a Bach. Child asleep in the back seat after a long drive. The world felt held by human hands. They chose to bring the student home on the sea's own breath. Ruth set the shape. Lena would make the first tow with the softest rope in the locker. Javed would shadow as a wall against any stray swell. Arya would ride on the bow with a pole tipped in foam, guiding the sleeping craft like a shepherd keeps. A lamb from bumping a fence. Noah would count the rhythm in her ear. Annika would thin and thicken the hush inside Sparrow, so it stayed drowsy, but aware enough to answer to gentle hands. Priya would keep the harbor quiet and the town dim. Sophie stood at the breaker with her palm ready. Alma held the bay door at the test shelter like a guardian keeping a dragon calm in its cave. Bishop remained airborne until the fuel needle asked him to land, and then he stood on the pier. A tall, quiet shadow with a grin that hid in his eyes. The rope touched the drone and it twitched. Not fear, memory. Arya spoke aloud, though the drone did not know language. You are safe. Stay with us. We will not let the bright world confuse you. Noah called the numbers. Drift nominal, lock glow warm. Annika hummed the 3 long ones short in her throat. A habit from piano days. Lena took the slack and moved as if balancing a glass of water on her head. Javed kept the tug's bulk as a Windbreak. Priya warned off a curious paddleboarder with a kindness that sounded like an invitation to breakfast later. The town listened with its lights low and its breath held in the good way. Halfway to the pier, a last test came. A gull swooped for a curious look, white wing flashing in the growing light. Sparrow flexed a sensor like an eyelid, a spark of curiosity that could become a reach. Arya lifted the foam tip and pressed the air above the drone without touching, a gesture that meant slow, that meant stay small. Noah counted a soft 4 count. Annika tucked the rhythm under like a blanket. Lena steadied the line. Chaved eased. The tug afoot, the gull tipped a wing and rode away toward its morning. The students stayed asleep. The pier came near enough to smell old rope, and fresh paint people were waiting without fanfare. Deshawn with a cradle rig made from 2 tires and a quilt of canvas. Mateo with a wrench and a sheepish smile that finally cracked into relief. Sophie with a thermos for anyone who had empty hands. Arun from the lighthouse with his hat in his fingers, and a promise he would not test a bulb without calling Priya again. Mercy One's pilot on the seawall with a thumbs up and a word that the patient was stable and would call his daughter by noon. The town had gathered in the way towns do when a story might end well. If they are careful, they lifted Sparrow with the care usually reserved for a newborn. Canvas under, hands everywhere, not grabbing, supporting, the drone made a small sound. From its vents, a little sigh of surrendered weight. Annika eased the lullaby to a whisper. Noah ticked off the safe values like a nurse, counting a pulse. Alma reported that the cousin unit in the shelter was quiet as stone, her palm still on its hinge, as if she could keep it that way forever. Bishop took a step back and let the younger hands carry while his chest did the carrying for him on the pier. Ruth turned to Arya, and the quiet of command loosened into something like joy. "You kept the wall," she said. "The night will write you honest." Arya shook her head because credit felt like a coat too big. "Lantern kept the room for every voice," Ruth answered. "That is the work, and you did it." Priya's radio breathed into a pocket of silence, and the town heard a voice from the hospital. A nurse named Daria. She thanked them in plain words. "The corridor you gave us kept Mercy One clear, and our patient arrived in peace." He kept saying he could hear a soft music in the rotors as if the sky was singing. Noah laughed and wiped his eyes and said maybe it was 3 long and 1 short. Annika smiled and said the sky learns what we teach it. They brought the drone into the test bay. Alma finally lifted her hand from the door, and it did not betray her. Deshawn set the cradle down and patted the carbon skin like a mechanic pats a hood after a long drive. Mateo checked the mast bolts and found nothing bent, just dust and a story to tell. Sophie finally let the tank yard lights return to their modest day brightness. The town exhaled, the fog turned to a thin veil, and then to nothing. Morning arrived. Without trumpets, only the smell of salt and coffee and jet fuel from the field beyond the dunes. Ruth gathered them all by the wing root of Arya's jet. She spoke not like a commander, but like a gardener. The night gave us a new protocol. Human first, ground truth, sky patience. We will code it and brief it and name it. Noah looked at Annika and then at Arya. He held up his tablet where anew. File waited, lantern hand, a training sequence, and a fallback rhythm and a tower call checklist. Arya touched the screen and nodded. Priya added a line about lighthouses and phones. Arun wrote his number with a dull pencil on a card and taped it to the console. Javed offered the names of tug skippers, who would go dark when asked. Lena promised to keep the mirror pad wrapped unless 3 voices asked her to lift it. Sophie said the tank yard would answer the radio at any hour. Alma laughed and said her hand could keep any hinge asleep, but she would also want a proper lock. And Deshawn said he would build one by noon from parts, and stubbornness Bishop stood beside Arya and for once had no advice. Only a story about his first night flight, when he learned that fear is a horse you ride, not a hole you fall in. He tapped the wing root twice, tapped the altimeter once, smiled so the ritual had a reason, and said the thing he had held back all. Night, Lantern, you are lead next time. Arya looked at Ruth, who nodded, not as a favor, as truth. The word backup had burned off like fog. What remained was a pilot who had been a wall and a teacher, who had dragged a problem away from humans and turned it into a lesson for a machine and a town. They wrote the after-action in honest ink. No heroics, many names, a tapestry, not a spotlight, the medevac corridor that saved a neighbor, the lighthouse. Call that turned off a glare, the tank yard's dimmed lamps, the harbor's quiet hands, the guard's steady palm on a hinge, the coder's rhythm, the engineer's cradle, the mechanic's patience, the old trainer's lid, a skiff's mirror, the tug's shadow, the backup pilot's green thread across night and water. The community looked at the list and recognized itself and stood a little taller without making noise. Arya went home when the sun was high enough to lay gold on the kitchen table. Her mother rolled chapatis and listened. She nodded at the part about vectors with chosen lines. She smiled at the part about singing to a machine. She touched Arya's cheek at the part about being called lead. Then she put an extra piece of bread on the plate and said the thing mothers say when a child has done something hard and true. Eat, then rest, then teach others. Arya laughed and promised to do all three by evening. The manual draft carried a preface with a line from Ruth. We fly for the people below us, not for the code. Under it was a note from Arya. A lantern is only useful when it stays until the last footstep is safe. At the pier, Lena coiled the soft rope. Javed tuned the radio without turning up the volume. Safi walked the edge of the tank yard and felt proud of quiet choices. Arun checked the lighthouse switch and left it off with a little bow. Alma oiled the door hinge and installed Deshawn's new lock and patted it like a dog that will not wander. Mercy One lifted into a clear morning with a patient who would call his daughter and tell her about a sky that sounded like a lullaby. Salt Flats waited for another night and another lesson. The town slept with a steadier breath, and the backup pilot whose mark had once become a target stood on the runway at dusk and watched the first star arrive. She felt no need to own the dark or the light, only to hold a hand up when either tried, to rush the other. Later they painted her name small on a checklist and large in the hearts of those who had been under her sky. Not as a statue, as a reminder that leadership is a circle drawn around others and kept steady when the wind throws grit. That courage is a force with a chosen line, that sometimes the safest place is not below you, but behind you, and that community is a machine that learns too, one lantern at a time.